But just to describe Melanie Stern, what to say?
Take a seat.
She is one of the brightest individuals I know. She is so well spoken. She teaches us how to approach a lot of these problems of communicating with people, as she will explain. I sincerely hope someday she's going to run for Congress or something like that.
No, vote for Jeff Hurd.
Right, there you go. She's really wonderful. She's a very important part of the Aspen community, and we're also welcoming back Pam Pereski, who was always an important part of the Aspen community. Now,
He's amazing, and I actually feel you're getting gypped because he's not up here to do the full introduction. It has to be me. We owe him a huge round of applause for being the guy who created the intellectual candy that we have delighted on all summer. Amazing stuff. He told me he's actually done, even though there are a few more events this week, but the work, the time, the effort, the thought, the money, everything that he puts into building this summer program is extraordinary, and we're so fortunate. So thank you. And among the things we've been hearing about over the summer ad nauseum is the resurgence of anti-Semitism. But it's really more than anti-Semitism that's happening. There's more at stake. And it has to do with the founding, our founding values, the idea that we're all, as it says in the Declaration, we're all created equal in the image of God, endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. That idea is under assault right now. And so it's more than just anti-Semitism, it's anti-Americanism that's at stake. And so Alan has been saying all summer that people have been hearing more and more and more about the anti-Semitism that's resurging on both the right and the left, which is the topic of this panel, what we're calling horseshoe anti-Semitism. People are like, okay, enough already, what can I do? And so this panel is meant to not just describe the horseshoe anti-Semitism, but give some prescriptions. And there are the three people that we have on this panel are uniquely well positioned to explain what's going on and prescribe some things that you can do. And then I'll tell you a little more about what we're going to do tomorrow, Pamela and I. John Fund, who is a former editorial board, Wall Street Journal editorial board member, and now the national columnist for National Review, and has 4 decades of being a journalist, surveying politics, covering it, and people in politics. He and then Andrew Hale, who has a little less experience than John Fund, being a little younger, but comes as a scholar of international trade and economics, but spent I forget how long you were at Heritage. 3 years, but was there last year in the belly of the beast of the Heritage Foundation, probably one of the most prominent conservative foundations in the country, and was there when Kevin Roberts defended, the president of the Heritage Foundation, defended Tucker Carlson, and what ensued within that institution culminated really, there was a big backlash, and it culminated in a large exodus of some of the scholars that left because of the bubbling up anti-Semitism he's going to describe to you shortly. And then we have Pamela Pereski. Many of you may know her, having because she lived here for so many years. Pamela is a PhD in psychology. Pamela is a prolific writer, and more recently has been putting her research acumen to work to describe and explain anti-Semitism. And tonight her role is to help frame what we're going to talk about, and to then collate and then prescribe to all of you what you can do based on this phenomenon that we're calling horseshoe anti-Semitism. Then tomorrow, she and I are going to conduct a persuasive messaging workshop. You guys have a voice. And I think it was Jonathan Tobin, when he spoke here this summer, said after his whole lecture, we have to have the courage. And I wish I had my handout. The handout title is Courage is Not Enough. We have to have the tools in order to use our voices persuasively and winsomely. And that's what we're going to be teaching tomorrow at 12:30 for 2 hours. There's going to be a light lunch served, so you have no excuse. You do have to register because there's an $18 charge because they're going to be serving lunch.
Is that going to be videoed as well if we can't make it during the day?
I don't know. It's a little hard to videotape because we have a PowerPoint and people participating. It's going to be, I promise you, I've been working hard all day to make sure that what Pamela and I say is very compact, and we're going to be making this as interactive and engaging as possible so you guys get to practice what to say, how to appeal to persuadables, and how to, what I say, power down hostiles. And so, you know, Hillel, one of the sages of Judaism, said, if I am not for myself, who will be? If I am only for myself, who am I? And if not now, when? The time is now to use our voices. We hope to see you tomorrow. And with that, I pass the mic to Pamela, Andrew, and John.
Melanie, thank you. Hi, everybody. There are some seats closer to the front if anybody wants to fill in up here so we can see your beautiful faces. I'm just going to start a little bit by framing, and then Andrew will speak for about 10 minutes, and then John for about 10 minutes. Then we'll have a very brief little moderated conversation and a very long Q&A. So in framing the conversation, I just want to note that anti-Jewish sentiment rises in times of threat and uncertainty, when a culture doesn't have confidence in itself, and in a climate of fear and grievance. We have the mother lode of that right now. So it's not surprising that anti-Semitism has been rising. These are also the conditions in which people are more likely to believe conspiracy theories. And anti-Semitism is fundamentally at its root a set of conspiracy theories. Anti-Jewish attitudes are always framed in terms of the moral language of the day. They're not seen as anti-Jewish or bigoted in the moment in which they're happening. We forget that anti-Semitism was actually a political movement that people proudly joined, just like anti-Zionism. When the moral framework was religious, Jews were the antithesis of the religious good. We were religiously impure, infidels, or Christ killers. When the moral frame was imperial, we were anti-imperialists, a threat to the empire. When it's racial, Jews are racially impure. When it's nationalist, Jews undermine or control the government. When it's the frame that we currently see on the left of post-colonialism and human rights, Jews are settler colonialist oppressors, defenders of apartheid, and of course, genociders and baby killers. Whatever a culture or person sees as the greatest threat or obstacle to all things good, that is what the anti-Semite says the Jew is. So thankfully we have some friends of the Jews here, and also, as Melanie said, friends of Western liberal democracy. They're here to talk about counteracting these alarming trends, and on both sides of the aisle, because this is not a problem that we only see on one side. So Andrew, why don't you start?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is working? Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join you this evening and speak to you this evening from my own, I'd like to say my own personal experience of witnessing horrific bigotry in recent years in Washington. And I should say that This came as quite a surprise to me. After a long career in government, as well as in the aerospace sector, the private sector, I worked in environments that were inclusive, nurturing, and affirming of all people. And several years ago, I left government service. I started a job with the Heritage Foundation. It was quite an eye-opener. When I joined, it was going through a rapid change under its new leader, Kevin Roberts, but still living off its former reputation as an establishment conservative think tank. There has been some disturbing signs of bigotry from the start of my employment at the Heritage Foundation, where I was the J. Van Andel Senior Trade Policy Analyst. And this was a named position, and it was funded by Amway Corporation. Amway was founded by J. Van Andel, and he was also the former president of the US Chamber of Commerce. And every year I had to write to Amway and inform them of my latest achievements and successes in order to maintain their annual gift to the Heritage Foundation. I mention that because these organizations survive on donations, and that's where people like us have power. Doing my job became more and more difficult as time went on under Kevin Roberts' leadership, as I fought to remain true to J. Van Andel's free trade and free market principles and beliefs, whilst the Heritage Foundation abandoned its 50-year history of championing free trade and free markets, which was its original mission when Ed Fulner and J. Van Andel founded the Heritage Foundation over 54 years ago. On one occasion, I delivered a presentation on free markets and free trade to a group of young people under the age of 30. I should say, indeed, the majority of the Heritage Foundation staff are under the age of 30 now. Older and more experienced, as well as qualified staff, have been replaced by younger staff. After the presentation, two young people came up to me and said, "That was a very interesting presentation. We had no idea that you were Jewish." I responded to the question and said, "I'm not aware of any Jewish ancestry, but I like Jewish people." I asked them why they would say that, and they responded, "Well, people who believe in free markets and free trade are the globalists, and the globalists are the Jews." As I'm sure you're all aware, the term globalist is a dog whistle for Jews. And this was not helped by the fact that Kevin Roberts was constantly blaming the globalists for America's problems from his platform. It's one of the most overused terms in his very limited lexicon. Matters became dramatically worse last year in July 2025 when Ed Fulner, the founder of the Heritage Foundation, died. He was the last restraining influence on the Heritage Board of Trustees. Kevin Roberts and his minions were now unleashed, and they took every opportunity to exhibit their true colors. The past year has been a masterclass in failure. Female and Jewish staff have been its many victims as the Heritage Foundation rapidly degenerated into a hellhole of misogyny, anti-Semitism, and Holocaust denial. Anti-Semitism is systemic at the Heritage Foundation. I have witnessed anti-Semitic comments and Holocaust denial. Heritage is not taking any effective action to stop or remedy this behavior, particularly amongst younger staff. Experienced and highly qualified people have left as the result of the anti-Semitic statements and hostile work environment. Discussions amongst new hires frequently echoed arguments promoted by Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and Candace Owens that shed doubt on the historical consensus around the Holocaust or the origins of the State of Israel. And I witnessed new hires who claimed that the publishing tycoon, Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, had paid for the rights of all the history textbooks used in American public schools, and that everything in them about the Holocaust was a lie. And they would say to me, "See, Andrew, it's right here on my phone. Look, it's right here on X, it's right here on Instagram." I asked if this was something originally, I asked if this is something they gleaned off Facebook. And I was told, "Oh no, Facebook is for old people in their 30s. We're on Instagram and TikTok." I recommend that they actually get their history from books and not Instagram. As a solution, we should actually develop a fund to send these gravers, heritage staff and others to Auschwitz. These young people have been the victims of a massive campaign of disinformation, and we need public education to combat this campaign of disinformation, because that's effectively what it is. I've also witnessed colleagues who've embraced the online trad wife, traditional wife building. It wasn't just anti-Semitism I witnessed. These trad wives, or the people in the trad wife movement, indeed the majority of a Heritage Foundation female intern class, said that they should not have the right to vote. These were women. who actually were brainwashed from social media to believe that they shouldn't have the right to vote. I have witnessed the recruitment of staff of the Tradwife and Groyper online movements, and Groypers, as you probably know, are anti-Semitic followers of Nick Fuentes, who promote anti-Semitism, glorification of Hitler, rape of women, and other discriminatory views. Just last Monday, I was at an event where a young Republican, this was at the Waldorf Astoria in Washington, argued for marital rape and said a wife should not be permitted to refuse her husband's sex. This is again something I've repeatedly seen on social media being argued by people in the Tradwife movement online. During a Bring Your Child to Work day at the Heritage Foundation, whilst his infant daughter crawled on the floor, I and others witnessed Evan Myers, Kevin Roberts' speechwriter, state that he could not wait until his daughter was old enough so he could tell her she should not have the right to vote. Evan Myers also drafted Kevin Roberts' anti-Semitic speech defending Tucker Carlson with Ryan Newhouse last year. Ryan Newhouse was Kevin Roberts' former chief of staff and a graduate of the Claremont Institute's Lincoln Fellows program. Remember that. That's another outfit we need to be aware of. Subsequently, Evan Myers publicly took offense at the possibility of being invited to a Jewish Shabbat dinner and expressed that at an all-stop meeting. The Heritage Foundation later held a going-away party for Mr. Myers, and I understand gave him a positive reference. Now Mr. Myers is a speechwriter for Congressman Riley Moore, who Mr. Roberts has publicly identified as his friend on X. Instead of being disciplined for his open misogyny and anti-Semitism, the Heritage Foundation promotes acknowledged bigots. A solution would be to write to Representative Riley Moore and ask him why he hired Evan Myers. If you know journalists, perhaps they can call out Congressman Riley Moore. I will be supporting any candidate other than Riley Moore in his district during the midterms. We need to get organized and fight back against this. The Heritage Foundation had an opportunity to combat anti-Semitism and misogyny, but instead chose to hire people with these views. Indeed, Mr. Roberts publicly praised the anti-Semitic Groyper, James Fishbank in Florida, who's also endorsed by Nick Fuentes. As a result, it is my belief the Heritage Foundation's original goals have been subverted under current leadership, and it's now actually a force for evil. I'm being that blunt. The Heritage Foundation has hired Scott Yenner, a name you need to be aware of, as chair of the American Citizenship Initiative and a senior research fellow. He also taught at the Claremont Fellows I just mentioned. Mr. Yenner has written that women should not work outside the home, should not have engineering degrees, and men should pay more than women. This is just just a few of other extreme and discriminatory positions he's published. Henry Olson, senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, has written, the think tank's recent decision to hire Scott Yenner to lead the foundation's Kenneth Simon Center for American Studies poses a serious question about the institution's beliefs concerning the equality of women in the workplace and even as citizens. Mr. Yenner's hiring led to the resignation of senior women at the Heritage Foundation. I could even give you some of those letters of resignation, which were never responded to by Kevin Roberts. I witnessed how Kevin Roberts appeared visibly uncomfortable and intimidated in the presence of a highly qualified, experienced staff such as an Oxford-educated economist who was serving every U.S. Republican presidential administration from President Reagan to President Trump's first term. By comparison, Mr. Roberts has served in no U.S. presidential administration despite seeking such an appointment, and I think that speaks volumes. There have been mass resignations since October of 2025 last year. I counted over 75 people have left after Mr. Roberts made his anti-Semitic speech and insisted that Tucker Carlson was his friend. 293 people have left the Heritage Foundation since Roberts became president in 2021. It's quite a massive shift. Congressional offices, circuit courts, foreign embassies, trade associations, and other institutions no longer want to be publicly associated with the Heritage Foundation and its fidelity to Tucker Carlson, Scott Yenner, and other extremist elements. I'm also aware that Mr. Roberts sent a message last month to a political commentator defaming these former Heritage Foundation staff as his traitors. It's not treacherous for staff to take issue with what I have borne witness to and others have resigned their jobs over. This is an honorable action to take. As a solution, I have personally assisted Heritage staff find good jobs out of the organization so they can leave. Let's all help the few remaining good people of the Heritage Foundation find jobs so they can continue to do good work and support their families. Some people just can't afford to quit their job, as I was able to do. Many people stay in bad organizations because they have no other employment. Let's liberate them. Let's create new institutions as old ones, such as the Heritage Foundation, die. To be clear, I left the Heritage Foundation not because of any policy matter. I left because of the recent anti-Semitism and misogyny scandals and other bigotry I witnessed. I also witnessed retaliation against colleagues who publicly spoke out against this. As someone who used to work for the late Holocaust survivor and human rights advocate, Congressman Tom Lantos, I have zero tolerance for any form of bigotry, and I believe that is the case for most of my fellow Americans. To quote the Nobel laureate Jose Saramago, we pervert reason when we humiliate life. As a student of history, I believe anti-Semitism has recently normalized in some quarters on the right and were right back in the 1930s. And everyone should be aware of where that led. Sadly, the Heritage Foundation has toxified its brand and moved to the extreme fringes of American politics and society. There are many good arguments for protectionism versus free trade, and I'm happy to entertain those discussions. But I'm not willing to entertain any debates about whether or not the Holocaust happened. That is history, and those warriors should read about it in books and preferably not on TikTok. I'm not willing to debate who was the villain of World War II, Churchill or Hitler.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we're back in the 1930s. In the 1930s, we had the American First Committee, which was anti-Semitic, isolationist, populist, and protectionist. We had Charles Lindbergh, who was viscerally anti-Semitic, populist, isolationist, all the above, until, of course, President Roosevelt neutralized him. There are many other examples I could give you. We had the Spoon-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 that turned the Depression into the Great Depression. We had much economic hardship and uncertainty in the 1930s, and communism and socialism were on the rise. All the above are back with a vengeance, and a recent poll earlier this year showed that 46% of young Republicans identify Jews as a threat, and the polling data for young youth organizations on the left are actually far worse. We should start vetting the membership of the Republican Party and the young Republicans and throw out the extremist elements. We should not support any organization like the Heritage Foundation, the Claremont Institute, and others that platform or tolerate such views. We should not donate money to businesses and organizations that peddle this filth. If the Claremont Institute is going to recruit Reuters for their programs and publish Scott Getter's misogyny, then don't support the Claremont Institution. It's that simple. Write to their board. Board members have a fiduciary legal obligation to protect these institutions from harm. If they don't do so, they should be sued. We should engage the businesses of the trustees of these organizations. We should write to Fox News and demand they stop platforming employees of these organizations and cancel your subscriptions to Fox News. We should support candidates and PACs that combat this. We should also confront the shapeshifters like Molly Hemingway, who just recently joined the board of the Heritage Foundation. She has shifted her position so many times, we should not subscribe to her publications, and we should all write to her, and I can help you do that. As I come to the end, the Heritage Foundation the last few weeks hired the evangelical Zionist Christian Luke Moon, who has just joined the Heritage Foundation in the past few weeks. He's now defending Heritage in the press and telling everyone how nice they are and how they provided him a research assistant. I say this to Luke Moon: if it's money you need, let us raise you some money. But please don't sell out for an inflated Heritage salary and a paid research assistant. These people need to be called out. Why are they denying the legally actual experiences of others? Yoram Pizzuti joined the Heritage Foundation Board of Trustees this summer. This is more window dressing. Former Heritage Foundation staff who are suing the Heritage Foundation for discrimination are now being told that the Heritage Foundation can't be anti-Semitic because Yoram Pizzuti has joined the board of the Heritage Foundation. Yoram needs to answer for this. Let's all email Yoram and get him to account for his failure in judgment. He needs to be asked why he's providing cover for these people. Remember, the board has no interaction with the Heritage staff. All they get is Kevin Roberts' Kool-Aid. His presence at the board is being used in legal arguments against people who have suffered discrimination. Shame on him. Is he even aware of that? Perhaps not. Last year, after the misogyny scandals at the Heritage Foundation, they suddenly gave 3 female employees vice president titles after the misogyny scandal. That's just more window dressing. And they say, oh, we have no misogyny because we just promote these women so that we gave them the title of vice president. In conclusion, we need to reject these cover-ups and people that enable them. There's much we can do to push back. What I do feel positive about is that we have been blessed with very foolish and very stupid foes. We can all successfully solve all of this. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to taking questions.
Well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here. I've been to Aspen 4 times over the decades, and I have to say, not only have I seen this community thrive and become a truly wonderful place to live and visit. I am so impressed by the programs that you have here. The leadership of this organization has done more than what Melanie said, providing intellectual candy for you. I think this is a full course banquet.
Yes.
And very I certainly agree with Andrew's diagnosis of the problem, and I would simply add one other thing. Some of the names that he mentioned are known to people in this room. And we know, because Heritage is a nonprofit organization, it has to publish in its 990 disclosure forms with the government the salaries of its employees above a certain level. I happen to know some of those salaries, and they are so exorbitant that they would make even Washington bureaucrats and crony capitalists blush. And I think that if any of you know these people, and I think Andrew can help you with their names, they should be asked, please explain why you are being paid so much more, multiple times more than the market rate for your services, and exactly what are you doing for that? And is there any indication that there will ever be any dissent from you in the obvious problems that Heritage has presented itself on these issues? Now, they may not answer you, but I assure you they do not want those uncomfortable questions. Now, my job is to, I think, discuss the problems that we have on the other side of the political spectrum and also talk about outreach to the wider community that is not Jewish. Pamela can certainly help you with some of this, but I think she will largely agree with my views that this is not just a Jewish problem. This is not just an anti-Semitic problem. Dara-Lisa Chevalier is the Democratic nominee for the congressional seat in East Harlem and around Columbia University. She defeated the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, who had his own prominent civil rights record, in a very low turnout primary. 9% of the voters showed up. Dara-Lisa Chevalier is the tip of the spear for how radical these people are. She has been a perpetual graduate student forever. She's 33. She is now going to Congress. In her time as a perpetual graduate student, her entire life was bounded by Columbia University's borders. And she founded Causa, which is Columbia University apartheid divestment in 2024 after Gaza. And it was primarily to associate Israel with the apartheid regime of South Africa and to speak of Israel in colonialist terms. She was the founder. She wrote the statement of principles, which begins, this group calls for the eradication of all Western civilization. I could go on, and it gets worse, but you can look it up. This is not an aberration. At best, these people are nihilists. At worst, they want to destroy civilization as we know it and put in place something where might makes right, and the Jacobins of the French Revolution will be their inspiration. Yes, the people who brought us the guillotine.
French.
Well, no. Let's not go there. We're here in ecumenical terms.
They were the violent French.
I understand. Okay. Now, let me give you a warning first. You are about to be sung a lullaby. The media is already hearing this lullaby. All of the DSA stars, all of them, trooped to the television studios this weekend to say, oh, these aren't the radicals you're looking for. We're nice people. We like Americans. We eat hot dogs. We sometimes go to something that people call 4th of July parties. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez showed up on ABC's This Week, and she's obviously running for president now.
Right.
So that's coming. So the good news is she'll eclipse Kamala, and the bad news is she's even more of a word salad person than Kamala was. She carefully explained to ABC News that she is a member of the New York chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, not the national organization. And she made it clear that some of her own more extreme positions of the past were beyond the pale. She quoted someone that she knew who said, "Woke 1 was crazy." Well, I know what woke 2 is, and it ain't an improvement. She wasn't alone. Oh, by the way, during COVID, she was quite amusing. She was one of the loudest shriekers in the room for lockdowns. She said that bail for Kyle Rittenhouse, charges were dropped against him for that shooting incident in Wisconsin. She called him the projector of white supremacy, and said Republicans cared more about preserving the mythology of whiteness than any grandeur of democracy. She's desperately trying to get people to forget where she came from and where she still is. And then we have Mr. Abdul El-Sayed, who, by the way, has never practiced as a medical doctor one day in his life. Now, he is a public health official. Yes, he's a public health official who makes Anthony Fauci look like an enlightened practitioner of that craft. He was questioned on Meet the Press this Sunday about Mr. Hassan Piker. I don't think I have to tell you who he is. Okay, Hassan Piker is a video personality, American by way of Istanbul. He is perhaps the most virulent anti-Semitic person who has a media platform in America today. I think that's safe to say. Would I be right on? I'm sorry?
He's a huge follower.
Yes. He recently said the following: America deserved 9/11, blanket, I'm saying it, we blanking, totally brought it on ourselves. He tried to clarify those remarks, but he has never repudiated them. He is the best friend of Mr. El-Sayed. Mr. El-Sayed. He showed up at a pool party with he and other influencers around the country the day before the Michigan primary. El-Sayed in May said that it was critical that Democrats embrace Piker and bring him under their big tent. After being relentlessly criticized for his association with Piker, he said on Sunday, "Okay, the 9/11 thing was a dumb statement, but the extremist views of Piker are taken out of context." I don't know what context you could possibly put any of what Piker says. It's hatred. Then there's Francesca Hong, the DSA state legislator from Wisconsin, who will win the Democratic primary for governor of Wisconsin on Tuesday. In 2020, she called for abolishing Thanksgiving. She also has said that, quote, defunding the police is only a first step towards abolishing the police and then the military. Now, she is now in full retreat. She claims she no longer is anti-police. Some of my best friends are police. She actually said that. And then she said, Thanksgiving is actually my favorite holiday. I really love it. I don't think this is going to work in the general election. And by the way, there's New York Mayor Mondani, whose tax on pied-à-terre was declared unconstitutional today. Yes. Apparently the judge was not amused by his antics in publishing the addresses of all of the landlords and the owners of these buildings. By the way, this does have to be appealed, and it is a New York court system, so please don't get too excited. He went on Sirius Radio this week saying, there's nothing to fear. We're not trying to take over the Democratic Party. We're going to go back to what the party used to be. FDR, Mayor LaGuardia, the New Deal. That's what the party once was and will be again under our leadership. Well, I did not know Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but I know Franklin Delano Roosevelt was no socialist. In fact, he was no supporter. He completely opposed public sector unionism and said it was a contradiction in terms. And Mayor LaGuardia made sure there were no homeless in New York City, I can assure you, when he was mayor. Now, here's why this strategy is not going to work. These are the DSA stars. They want to get jobs in Washington. The DSA leadership or a bunch of overeducated graduate school malcontents who've never been successful in anything except plotting and scheming and internecine warfare inside the organization. Megan Romer is one of these people. She's the national co-chair. She keeps stepping on their lines. She went on Fox News, you might have seen this, and basically said the entire national platform that you've heard about is, of course, part and parcel of what we stand for. She would not be happy to learn that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not a full-fledged member of the Democratic Socialists of America National Wing, because she seems to show up at all the meetings of the group. And it's a shame that she wouldn't be a member of that group, even showing up for all the meetings. She also, today, it was revealed, gave an interview to the New Yorker, in which she was asked about the October 7th attacks, and she said, quote, well, they were inevitable. Inevitable. Because of Gaza's harsh conditions, which she called an open-air concentration camp, similar to the 1940s. She said that if she had lived in New York City on October 8th, 2023, she would probably have been at the same pro-Hamas rally that Ms. Chevalier attended. And she also argued that Israel has no right to defend itself because the Gaza killings were a legitimate rebellion. I think as long as we have these internal contradictions with PSA, their attempts to obscure what they really believe are going to fall flat. Now, what to do? I endorse almost everything that Andrew said. I would also just add, simply not to repeat what he said, that each of you has a real role here. First of all, almost all of you are online. Many of you are very proficient at it. Some of you are already doing what I'm telling you to do. You all have dozens, if not hundreds of contacts, friends, neighbors, relatives, colleagues at work, everything. Create a listserv, easy to do. Someone who's 10 years old will show you somewhere. Of all of the people you want to contact, announce to them that you're starting a listserv. You're going to send them articles with modest commentary from you, a couple lines, and you're going to please read these. If you like me, if you respect me, if you agree with me, please look at my listserv. You can be your own publisher. Now, here's why this is important. I'm from the media. You probably have learned that there's less trust and confidence in the media than there used to be. In fact, it's down to about 27% trust and confidence. But people do trust and confide in and like and appreciate people they know who provide them with information and who validate it. You know, there's a K-score in advertising. How believable, how trusted is this statement from the party? It starts out, used car salesmen are at 15. And drugs and cars and consumer products are at 30 or 40. But if your mother, if your friends, if your colleagues tell you something, the trust level starts about 65 and goes up to about 90. Maybe 100. Some people have problems with their mother. So you have influence. You may not have the reach of a network, although how much reach does a network have these days? They're all losing their customers. You have a devoted group of people who will pay attention to what you say and can be influenced by it.
Great advice.
And I'm almost done. And I think this leads to my other suggestion. I started out by saying we cannot make this a wholly Jewish or anti-Semitic issue. And here's the tough part. Many of you come from backgrounds to which certain groups, the conservative movement, the Republican Party, free markets, are not particularly part of your family's traditions. And I understand that. I mean, Jewish Americans watched Franklin Delano Roosevelt win World War II and defeat fascism. He saw President Lyndon Johnson sign the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And throughout much of the 20th century, the Democratic Party was in the forefront of progress in social welfare institutions, some of which failed, some of which succeeded. So there's a long tradition there. That's the tradition Mondami is referring back to. But times change, and intelligent people know when they change, when the evidence is right in front of them. Ronald Reagan once said, "I did not leave the Democratic Party left me." Well, here we are, for all of us. The evidence is irrefutable. Now, I'm not here as a shill for the Republican Party. I can make a long speech about their problems. I've never in my life been a registered Republican. That's for journalistic and other reasons. So I'm not a shill for them either. I will tell you this, though. There's a barrier for some of you, and some of your friends and relatives too, which is that party has icky people that you can't really identify with. One Jewish American told me, "I may agree with them, but why would I hang out with toothless hillbillies?" Seriously. And some people think in those terms. But here's my question to you. We're going into a presidential election in 2028. Donald Trump is leaving office. For good or for ill, he's leaving office. I don't think whoever replaces him, from whichever party, is going to be carrying Trumpism forward with the same verve or the same intensity or some of the same irritation, perhaps, that Donald Trump did. So there's going to be a changing of the guard. What are the odds that someone who will appreciate the importance of fighting bigotry, the importance of a strong national defense for this country, the importance of maintaining the standards of our founding fathers and constitutionalism, what are the chances that they will come from one party versus the other? Well, 60% of Republican primary voters are evangelical. That may not be your religious cup of tea, but I can assure you, evangelical voters, when the chips are down, stand with Israel for all kinds of religious and historical reasons. And they are sincere about it. Remember, in Washington, you never pay attention to what they say, you pay attention to what they do. Now, the Democratic Party has been feminized to some extent and radicalized, and people like Al Sharpton hold too much sway. 64% of Democratic primary voters are either women or minorities. Now, all that means is a moderate Democrat has no chance. Just no chance. I don't think any moderate Democrat can turn themselves into enough of a pretzel to endorse all 29 genders. I just don't believe that you can do it. I think you're going to have to make a calculation, cost-benefit analysis. Which party is more likely to be a party that I can work with versus a party that's going to infuriate me and, frankly, frighten me? So in conclusion, I think, to be blunt about it, increase your social circle. Meet some of these people. They're up in the hills here even.
Right here.
Oh, very good. Welcome. They are hardworking, honest, family-oriented, often far more intelligent than you would think, well-read. Many of them are not infected by the public schools. They teach their kids at home, or they actually watch real documentaries on television. And you'd be surprised how much you have to agree with. And even if you have obstacles still, I'll leave you with this. We are a two-party system. Now, you can argue whether we should be and all of that, but that's how the two parties have carved up the rules. They play the game. They rule the game. In a two-party system, you have to get to 50% plus one. You're going to have to get to something close to a majority. Well, let me tell you, basic math of a two-party system. You're going to have a coalition. Like Roosevelt had a coalition, like Reagan had a coalition. And that coalition is going to include, it will have to include, a lot of people you would not automatically invite home for dinner.
Absolutely. That is absolutely.
But that doesn't mean you can't have them for coffee at the local Starbucks. And that's my advice to you. The way to present Jewish history, traditions, and success in America is to make yourself more visible, not less visible, more approachable, not less approachable, less angry and more, let's work together. If you do that, there's an enormous amount of goodwill, an enormous amount of compassion, an enormous amount of sympathy, and an enormous amount of intellectual and historical agreement that you can have. And frankly, I've looked at this room. There's more talent here than in any DSA meeting I've ever been to, and I have been to them. I grew up in San Francisco.
Absolutely.
I grew up in San Francisco.
Thank you.
Meet them.
Thank you, John. Great. I'm only going to try to clarify a couple of things, and then we'll go straight to the Q&A, given time. First of all, Andrew spoke about a couple of things, and I want to make sure that everybody knows who these people are. Raise your hand if you don't know the term groiper. Okay. And raise your hand if you don't know the term trad wife. Okay. And then there was one other term I think that may have been maybe, I think that's maybe it. So let's just define those terms, Andrew.
Sure. So groypers are the anti-Semitic followers of Nick Fuentes.
And do you know who Nick Fuentes is?
He's an online social media influencer.
Hassan Piker, the right.
Hassan Piker, the right, exactly. And of course, he said all sorts of things, praised Hitler, praised the Taliban, said someone would like to be raped, and said the most horrific anti-Semitic things. Also, there's the trad wife movement, and as I said, I had never heard of this before I came to the Heritage Foundation. I wasn't even on X. I got an X account because they told me I had to promote my published works. And
it stands, by the way, for traditional wife, trad wife.
Traditional wife. And I was shocked. We had an intern class, and we took a poll, and the majority of females in that intern class said they should not have the right to vote. They're following these social media influencers who are telling them not to seek higher education, not to have careers, and it was bizarre.
So it's the barefoot and pregnant kind of wife idea. So that's the trad wife phenomenon. It goes along with the groiper phenomenon, and Hassan Piker and Nick Fuentes are mirror images of each other. Oh, I know that the other thing that I had wanted to mention about Hassan Piker is that I don't know if any of you get Abe Greenwald's newsletter from Commentary. If you don't, I highly recommend signing up for that. I think it was today, noted that this emphasis on the relationship between Hassan Piker and El Sayed, it makes it seem like that's the worst thing about El Sayed, and it's absolutely not. That he's associated with this awful person, Hassan Piker, is pulling a lot of attention, but the attention really should be on El Sayed himself. And so anyway, highly recommend Abe Greenwald's newsletter. Okay, and then I wanted to just follow up on something that John said. In addition to creating a listserv, which is a great idea, send out things that you think are important for your friends. But the idea that people trust their friends is essential. And it's really essential to cultivate a group of friends who are willing to speak the truth even in uncomfortable situations. This is where courage comes in. And so create social opportunities for you and your friends. Don't rely just on the JCC. Don't rely just on Alan or Melanie. Create your own social opportunities, bring people together. I started doing this in New York in 2020. It grew to a point where we call ourselves thought criminals, and we have monthly gatherings of thought criminals. Do this. Invite people, and then have your friends invite people, and make this a bigger group of people who will then help each of you stand up for what's right in uncomfortable situations. If you think about it, we're not actually really concerned about, worried about being attacked. We're worried about being attacked and nobody coming to our defense. So if you have people who will stand by your side, have your back, come to your defense, you're much more willing to speak up. Okay, so I want to throw this out now to Q&A. Do we have a mic runner?
Please make sure.
Oh, Alan is saying, please make it.
Please make sure it's a question.
Oh, the other thing is I wanted to say, all of you you're all powerful, smart, incredibly interesting people. And unfortunately, given the time, we can't hear from all of you, or even all of you who are speaking about all your interesting ideas. But, you know, we can hang out a little bit afterwards and hear from you.
Alan, Candace Owens was here about 5 or 6 years ago. She was wonderful. What happened? And do you have the tape? That's one part. The other question is, the marchers in Dearborn, Michigan have pushed the button of the Christian community. There was somebody who was saying Christ is king, and they would beat him up and so forth, and now the Christian right is going to come after the Dearborn crowd. Can you comment, please?
Look, I know Candace Owens, and rather than spend time on that, because there are more important topics, she is a depreciating asset. So we are going to be worrying less about her. As to Dearborn, please understand that you have potential allies in many places. The turnout in Michigan among Muslim Arabs and others was extremely high. And El Said won 92% of it. Now, it was only 2% of the total primary vote. Hale Stevens won all of the voters who were not Muslim. She won. But 58% of Arabs in Michigan are Christian or Chaldean, close cousins. 58%. So the question is not about what does the Christian right think of Dearborn. The question is how a bunch of people in Dearborn are Christian. You have to outreach to them. Not perhaps you personally, but you can find people who will talk to them. Don't think they aren't worried either. They may be silent. That doesn't mean they're not worried.
Could you briefly explain to us what the reasons are for the rise in anti-Semitic behavior?
Was that directed at anybody in particular?
Look, I will just tell you with all sincerity, that is a cosmic question. We can't even begin to deal with it. I mean, you've asked the right question. I just don't think we have the time to deal with it.
I can actually begin to deal with it. So just from a psychological standpoint, anti-Semitism rises when it's popular. And it's popular. And it's not necessarily that everybody who engages in anti-Semitic discourse believes it. It's just that that is popular discourse right now. And it is possible that people will come to believe it because it's possible, because it's popular. But it's not necessarily the case that everybody who engages in it believes it. But this discourse is very popular. It gets people clicks, it gets people paid, and obviously there isn't enough purging of it like there used to be. This stuff that people are saying now, it used to be, I mean, nobody would have put up with it. And now, not only do they put up with it, it's a way of elevating someone's status. So that needs to be reversed.
It's fascinating that the Jews we're always called the canary in the coal mine.
Right.
Ken Levin, psychiatrist, has just written a book, The Canary on the Couch, talking about the Jews who vote for these people. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was also going to add, as I said, there are parallels we draw with the 1930s. Also, we do have a cost of living crisis. And there is...
You have this beautiful English accent. We love it. Could you put the mic closer. So
Okay, yes, yes,
Great.
Okay, thank you. So there are parallels to be drawn with the 1930s, but also when I was in the public sector, I noticed when there was a lot of direction from HR about intersectionality, and certain minority groups were seen as oppressed, and the Jews were seen as people who were privileged, and therefore they were white, and they fall into the category of the oppressors. So I see that, certainly that comes through a lot of HR, which is toxic today. I saw that in government. It was more subtle. I just didn't see a lot of, like I said, we were always concerned about being Black, Asian, multi-ethnic in terms of discrimination against minority groups.
Here it's usually BIPOC.
Yeah, and so basically I would say that the Jews were never really talked about because they were seen as, oh, those privileged white people.
Yeah, okay, so this is a very important thing to understand about the way Jews are talked about on the left, because Jews are talked about as having privilege. That quote-unquote white privilege then becomes Jewish privilege, and then it goes completely downhill. So that's on the left. On the right, however, there's similar kinds of discourse. There's similar stuff about Jews having too much power. And I think fundamentally underneath it is a concern about agency and power. And so when Jews are seen as, we're in this environment in which Jews are the obstacle to all things good. Why? How? Because on the left, only victims are virtuous, and the oppressors are evil, and Jews are seen as oppressors. On the right, the government is being controlled. Now there's this terminology ZOG, Zionist occupied government. That governments are being controlled by Jews. So it's really about these fantasies of Jewish power.
The question of why you say it's popular. What about education in our higher institutions, which are teaching the anti-colonialism, and it's down in the high schools and probably in the grade schools?
Yeah, it's actually K-12, and it's also funded by Qatar. There are a lot of people who've been, Andrew, I think you were talking about this a bit.
So just from talking to people who came out of those institutions, the way they describe it to me, and the way they talk about Israel, is they say, white Europeans, Jewish people, colonized the brown people, the Palestinians, and they're the underdogs. I've seen this most strongly in the Republic of Ireland, where, for example, the Irish see themselves as being oppressed by the British, and so they identify with the Palestinians, and of course they identify the Israelis with the British. And of course they blame the British for the creation of the state of Israel. So that sort of oppressor, oppressed framework is always present, even in historical contexts.
I would just add, the problem is not confined to the universities. If you wait that long, you're too late. My personal opinion, with one or two exceptions perhaps, that you might know, don't give to any university. They're going to be obsolete in 20 years anyway. Liberal arts universities. But still people still need to train engineers. And our AI robots that will be our overlords. Starting with high school or even grade school, we've destroyed civics, we've destroyed history. Luckily, there are organizations out there, PragerU is one, the Wojcik books, all of that. We need to get those books into people's hands, teach people that there was a founding, there was a revolution, there's a constitutional system, all of that. But don't wait till the university. Act before.
Now, I would add to that also that Holocaust education in kindergarten through 12, usually it happens around middle school, high school, has also actually been co-opted by curricula like Teach Palestine. Yeah. So the way that Holocaust education goes now is Jews were oppressed by the Nazis, Jews became the Nazis, and the Palestinians became the Jews. That's the way that Holocaust is actually taught now. What?
That's insane.
Insane. It's insane.
If one were to examine the Jews in America, they tend to be Caucasian. If one were to do a sampling in Israel of Jews in Israel, they would not be Caucasian. They would be a mix of Mizrahi Jews from Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, etc.
Well, with all due respect, sir, what the response from the left is, and I've heard it from the left. Every minority group has collaborators, and every minority group has people who are self-loathers, and every minority group will cooperate with the oppressor to get a few shekels. So, I mean, your argument is accurate, but it's frankly irrelevant because that's not part of their script.
I appreciate your viewpoint, and I thank you for commenting.
I'll add to that. The argument that something like 60% or 70% of Jews in Israel are not quote unquote white, and 20% of Jews in the US are not quote unquote white, is not really useful for two reasons. One, because now we're playing into the same paradigm that vilifies Jews. And also playing into this divisive racial paradigm in the first place. And like, as Jews, I think we have not just the moral standing, but the history to understand why playing on racial differences is a bad idea. We are e pluribus unum, right? We are out of many one, and we have begun to fracture into out of one many. This is not the way to play that game.
Andrew, you very eloquently explained statistically where things have morphed, Democratic Party, left, and so forth. But also on the right, if you want to call the Republican right, or how you want to label them, we really have the dilemma because there's a number of the people you mentioned, you know, the bigots are supported by the right and the white nationalists. So you outlined it very well, but I think you've left us with more of a dilemma than a solution.
This is why we called it horseshoe.
He said
John.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Well, look, I can't give you empirical data off the top of my head, but I can give you a wealth of historical and political knowledge. White nationalism, if there's a white nationalist out there, I can assure you that the Southern Poverty Legal Center and the FBI under Joe Biden discovered that person. And God only knows if surveilled him. Yes, they do exist. I think that I have met, unfortunately, too many Jewish Americans who see one under some beds where they aren't there. That doesn't mean there aren't a problem. That doesn't mean they don't have to be confronted. But I will tell you right now, the growth industry in Ann Arbor and Madison, Wisconsin, and places like Honolulu, Hawaii, which just had a primary, and places like Hartford, Connecticut, where there's going to be a primary in the next week. The growth industry, the people to really worry about, are on one side of the spectrum for now. Maybe not 50 years ago, 60 years ago, but that's where they are now. And frankly, I think what is it you say in the Westerns? You ride to where the sounds of the guns are?
I haven't watched enough Westerns.
Hi, thank you both for being here. I think, you know, people in this community, and we're listening to you guys speak, a lot of what you're saying is very familiar to us. And so when we're confronted in real life by people who have been reading the New York Times for the last 20 years, and, well, you know, Zoran Mamdani is for all minorities. Of course he doesn't hate Jews. He says he doesn't. And Tucker says that he's commanded by God not to hate someone by the way that they're born. And he just is worried. You know, it's like, we know that everything's based on conspiratorial lies upon lies upon lies and Russian Soviet propaganda. And it's so much information.
So your question is?
So my question is, how would you guys combat in real time, you know, an easy quip or an easy response to someone without having to go into the history of propaganda in the last 50 years?
There are people who aggregate, distill. Pamela mentioned the newsletter, you mentioned a newsletter. They can do a lot of that work for you. Eric Erickson is a talk show host who's very intelligent on these issues. He has a Substack. You will find people who can do your job for you. And frankly, Melanie can do a lot of that work for you. And
So
Melanie's
come
group
tomorrow.
can do a lot of that work for you.
Come tomorrow from
And-
12:30.
And I would just say about Mandami and the minorities, look, let's be bluntly honest here. There are about as many African Americans at a DSA leadership meeting as they are at an environmentalist Sierra Club meeting in Aspen. Okay? They don't show up. Hale Stevens, the moderate congresswoman who came that close, guess how much she won the city of Detroit by? Just guess. Over 30 points. Now, Mr. El Said won Ann Arbor by 60 points.
Now, those people gonna vote for him, or they're gonna vote for?
Well, isn't that up to us? How many people here know have a friend, neighbor, relative in Michigan? How many? Okay, it's up to each of you. You have a job to do. Anyone who knows anyone in Michigan, do your job.
Excellent, yeah. And also, that deserves applause. I want to give you 3 very concrete pieces of information that are helpful. One is Alan Dershowitz's 10 Myths About Israel. One is Roy Altman's book, Israel on Trial. And the third one is Batya Ungar Sargon's book, The Jews and the Left. Those 3 books are things everybody in this room should read.
And she comes from the left.
And she comes from, and she calls herself a Marxist.
Well, that's not true anymore.
I'm saying, no, she does. She calls herself a MAGA Marxist, but whatever. She's a bundle of contradictions, but she wrote a very good book about the history of Jews.
Sure. So thank you again for all being here and all this important commentary. So maybe this directed to Andrew, and thanks for speaking up about these important issues at the Heritage Foundation. I think the Heritage Foundation carries a lot of weight in American politics, and I think it's one of the places that people look towards. Could you offer the situations and solutions that other institutions are stepping up and trying to counter some of this at those highest levels of government and highest levels of policy thinking that we should be supporting?
I thank you so much for that question, and actually that is the reputation amongst a lot of people, that they're still relevant. But after the whole Project 2025 debacle, remember they launched that with Governor DeSantis from Florida, and of course they were expecting him to win the primary. When Trump won the primary, then they just rejigged it and said, oh, this was always for President Trump. He'd never read that 900-page book, Mandate for Leadership. He had nothing to do with it. Susie Wiles and Chris Rossavita were calling the Heritage Foundation saying, stop speaking for the campaign. We had nothing to do with this. And they've never recovered from that. Trump's preferred think tank is the America First Policy Institute, AFPI, founded by Brooke Rollins. They don't celebrate what they do. They provide 80 of the most senior cabinet level positions, 84 actually, hundreds to 1/3 of the cabinet, and then of course hundreds to mid to lower level positions. They are the Trump kingmakers for appointments. They are writing the policies, and they do so without shameless self-promotion. The Heritage Foundation puts great big murals on the side of the building, and they're cheerleading everything Trump does, and quite frankly, those people are not getting into the admin. I was there, I saw the whole thing fall apart, and I saw the subsequent lawsuits between Paul Dams and Kevin Roberts as they fought it out on television, etc. So the Heritage Foundation tells everyone that they're the Trump think tank. The actual think tank, that's Trump's preferred think tank, is the America First Policy Institute, and if you want to support President Trump, so that's his think tank, and they're the ones doing his work.
So I have a question about Jeffrey Epstein. Antisemitism is a conspiracy theory, and it's founded on other conspiracy theories, blood libels and the like. Jeffrey Epstein is used by both the right and the left to associate Jews and Israel with trying to control the government, which is the right one, and the left is that,
Connection with Israel.
friendship with Israel or
Connection with
Israel.
Israel.
Is it powerful people controlling people who aren't powerful? How do we put this conspiracy theory to rest?
I don't know, but I'm the only person in this room who probably has met Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was, all great con men are very good at what they do. They're very good at what they do. I know several of his victims. Part of this is, and Jeffrey Epstein is said to have told this to someone, that he concentrated on the people who adhered to the Jewish faith because he found them the most gullible if they were dealing with another Jew. That's what he said. So a lot of his clients and a lot of the people he associated with were Jewish. My good friend Mortimer Zuckerman was one of them. The rest of it, Pamela put it best. People will come up with an explanation for that which they don't understand. And this is the easiest one in front of them. And the fact that Epstein was technically Jewish is something that was useful. We're never going to know the whole story, but I assure you it has very little to do with the Mossad.
Yeah, so, and I'll add to this. The thing that makes Jeffrey Epstein a very easy and lazy conspiracy theory is that he is a real person. We all saw what he did. We all saw what he was arrested for. We saw that he was in jail, and we saw that he died. And everybody can make up whatever they want about the rest of it. And so it's like it's like a Rorschach. You know, it's a very easy, lazy conspiracy theory. And, you know, the truth is, as John said, like with Bernie Madoff, he preyed on Jews. So, but does that matter? No, because it's a conspiracy theory and it's anti-Semitic. This is not something that logic or reason is really going to, you know, penetrate. No pun intended. Now, listen, we have 6 minutes left. And I really want to focus on things that we can do. So go ahead.
Okay, so you guys have painted some very vivid portraits of the horror stories on both the left and the right. If we try to imagine a version of American politics 5 to 10 years from now, where Hassan Piker and Nick Fuentes have not won the day, where they've been relegated beyond the bounds of, you know, polite or accepted society, what had to happen in order for us to get there? And do you believe it's possible?
Well, I don't want to be overly optimistic, so I'll just be optimistic. These people are grifters.
Yes.
They are primarily grifters, and they have a short time horizon. Not as short as Candace Owens' time horizon, but that's a separate story. They're going to burn themselves out. What we may have to make sure is, don't focus on them, focus on the people who might want to imitate them and follow in their footsteps. Cut them down, because they don't have any power, they don't have any audience yet. Make sure you stop on their flowers and pound them into the ground early. And then there will be no followers.
Okay, focusing on what we can do. Questions about what we can do.
Quick question. You mentioned many things about the Heritage Foundation, which was new to me. Thank you. You mentioned subscriptions to Fox. Can you explain why we should cut our subscription to Fox?
Oh, yes. So basically, because they air so-called policy experts from the Heritage Foundation. Now, Rupert Murdoch fired Tucker Carlson with good reason. And so basically, you know, and he's also, Rupert Murdoch has given money to alternatives to the Heritage Foundation. You know, write to Fox News, ask them why they're having these people, you know, platformed on their program. And also, I think this needs to get out, and John actually referenced it, and I want to just mention it here. Follow the money. Kevin Roberts basically has earmarked himself $961,972 in annual salary, almost $1 million a year for a nonprofit, a 501c3. That's unethical. And then the list is on all these men that he's appointed in positions of power and gave them 40% increase, who will not disagree with him. I think there's so much scandal there. There's so much unethical behavior that this needs to get out in the press. And that's why I'm speaking out. It's why I'm basically whistleblowing about this. And I would encourage you all to do that. If you're aware of this sort of chicanery and unethical behavior, expose it. Talk to the press. Write to Fox News. If they're going to platform these people, then cancel your subscription and tell Fox News why.
Andrew, would you just suggest 3 people that this group should focus on and send emails to where about those 3 people?
As I mentioned in my presentation, when Jewish people sue the Heritage Foundation or raise a discrimination claim, they're told, just in the past since June, they've been told, oh, well, we have, since June, Yoram Hazuni on the board of the Heritage Foundation, an Israeli Jewish person. So therefore, we couldn't possibly be anti-Semitic. Well, I can give you Yoram's email address, and you need to ask him. Listen, all he gets is the Kool-Aid from Kevin Roberts at an annual meeting or the few times a year which he attends. He has no interaction with staff. These people he may not be aware that he's actually giving cover to these people who are diametrically opposed to everything that Yoram is in favor of.
If I could just add very briefly, board members are basically potted plants for many nonprofit organizations. They don't follow their fiduciary responsibilities. Board members are not used to having controversy. In fact, they quail before it like Dracula seeing a cross. I mean, they don't want any controversy. That's one of the reasons why the board did not stand up and fight Kevin Roberts, because they are conflict adverse, the ones who remain.
Well, the 5 of them actually did resign.
Yeah, yes, but
they should have stayed fired him.
The rest were conflict adverse. So my advice, in addition to what Andrew says, is this. You can easily get the names of the board members of Heritage, and I think Andrew can help you with their email addresses. They would be very surprised if they got even 2 letters, even 2, asking, what are you doing to have oversight over Heritage? What questions are you asking? Don't be polite, be polite. I want to know what you're doing to carry out your responsibilities as a board member and, you know, getting all those nice dinners and junkets that you're treated to. Well, tell me, please write to me. And if they don't write to you, and you can say, and if I don't hear from you, I will take this up in another way through the media.
Perfect.
Exactly. If I can say one more thing.
Yeah.
Luke Moon, this evangelical Christian Zionist, again, he has just joined the Heritage Foundation in the last few weeks, and he, of course, you know, he's obviously been given an inflated salary, he's been given a research assistant. I have his email address. Email him, say, why are you doing this? What you claim to be for Israel, you claim to be against anti-Semitism. Why are you providing cover for these people, the very people causing the problem?
Great. So Andrew has a list of people and organizations that you can email. And John, we have like 30 seconds left. Let's wrap it up with you with your last bit of advice.
Well, I didn't want to get into the weeds too much, but I can give anyone here my email address, and I'm happy to write to you with more specifics, including some of the people that came up here. But the real thing you can do is create this listserv that Pamela endorsed, because you have more influence than you realize. Start exercising.
And I just want to end by reiterating something that if you were here last night, you would have heard from Lior Raz. He said to stop donating to universities.
Yes.
Yes.
Right? He said, if you own a company or you're on a board of a company, have the HR people go through the social media of your employees and weed out the people who are anti-Zionists and anti-Semites. Those are the same things.
After consulting with your lawyers.
After consulting with your lawyers, right? I mean, do it in a legal way, and some states don't allow you to do that, but if you can find some legal way to get them out, get them out. You're ruining your climate that way. Proudly wear your Jewish star. Proudly wear your Jewish star. Leave out your mezuzah, and don't be afraid. So I think with that, if anybody wants to talk to these folks, you're welcome to come up and thank you, Melanie and Alan.